and welcome folks, Wizuko here, and with me today is Cilan Steely.
Hello there, I'm Cilan and I am a huge Pokemon fan with a few Pokemon videos on my channel, where I mainly do covers of cartoon shows.
But speaking of Pokemon, one of my most favorite franchises, no matter if it's merch, games, anime, manga, or everyday items, Pokemon surrounds me every day, and I bet that's how most Pokemon fans my age enjoy Pokemon. After all, there is so much Pokemon merch, so many games out there, so many games indeed.
You mean like Dash and Rumble and Pinball, Snap, Stadium, Mystery Dungeon, Ranger, Pokepark, Quest, Picross, Pokemon Go, Masters, Channel, the TCG...
But you know, that feeling when you're at a buffet and there are so many super delicious dishes, you just don't know when to stop because everything's so tasty, and then you feel sick because you ate too much in the first place, and you feel sick both morally and physically. At the moment, I feel like I'm at that point with Pokemon too. I love Pokemon, and whenever I play, I do want more. I hyped Gen 9 already, and I really look forward to it. However, there is this bitter undertone to it. The pause between Pokemon games is getting shorter and shorter, and while on the one hand that has a lot of positives, that also brings along quite some negatives. I think that Pokemon games need longer development cycles, and I'm not alone with that thought today, right, Cilan?
You are right. I think that some extra time would be beneficial for the enjoyment of certain features, and we think we found out why. Can you change our minds?
Pokemon Sword and Shield were important to the main series of Pokemon as the first games on the Switch, making Sword and Shield technically the first Pokemon main series games on a home console. Well, if you don't count Let's Go Pikachu or Let's Go Eevee as main series games, that is. So the hopes were high and the hype was real.
The game was announced, and then a year later it was released, and was received among fans with a mixed reaction. And that might not have been a huge surprise. After all, the game was released after just 3 years of development. Of course, you can't really dictate how much time is needed to develop a great game. You can't just say it takes 5 years for an awesome game to be developed and everything under 5 years is too short. It's just not how it works. Some amazing games took 10 years in development, others took 7. Majora's Mask from the Legend of Zelda series is praised as one of the best Zelda games, despite having only a 12-month development time, just a third of the time that Sword and Shield needed. But time is not everything, of course. Yet, there are many factors you can influence with time, and time can ensure a healthy work environment, more room for testing, and therefore makes quality management possible, to name a few. So let's have a look in detail what time can do to positively influence development.
A game franchise is a monster of its own in a way. A game series creates their own fandoms, their own communities, and whole development studios rise and fall with them, as they rely more on the support of full-on fans than a standalone game does. And fans are amazing, but also very cruel. When they love your game, they love it. When they hate it, they despise it. And from a developer's point of view, that can be quite hard to balance out. After all, what is it exactly that fans crave? Well, most fans seem to want the same thing over and over, but different. And that is a slippery slope to cross. Fans expect the next game of the series to improve on the flaws the previous one had and further develops the game series as a whole. There are a lot of critics Pokemon fans have been loud about that have been improved, like for example the introduction of character creation or a type to balance the dragon type out. However, there are also a lot of critics about Pokemon games that are very valid, but for some reason it never quite works out.
For a while now, Pokemon fans have dreamed of an open-world Pokemon game. Open world is something that would fit very well into the Pokemon main series, as it further develops the mood and feeling the game has tried to invoke in players for ages. such as the feeling of a great world filled with Pokémon waiting there to be discovered, the feeling of exploration and freedom, or traveling through a new world altogether. On the Nintendo DS, that wasn't possible. The DS lacked the power necessary to provide a map large enough to make it work. The Switch, however, proved with its launch title, Zelda Breath of the Wild, that it is powerful enough to show you all the wonders of an open world, something that, again, Pokémon fans have longed for.
However, Game Freak did listen to critics suggesting an open world. So, how did the open world turn out in Pokémon?
The wild area in the Galar region is a sprawling expanse where you can find Pokémon in a variety of natural habitats.
Yeah, the idea was great. The presentation, however, was mediocre. For me, it's hard to understand how a game from 2017 that, by the way, isn't even Switch exclusive nor originally planned for the Switch, could present a more stable, believable, and impressive open world than a game that released 2 years later and was planned for the Switch all along. For me, as someone with little programming knowledge, that sounds odd to say the least. Don't you agree, Cilan?
Unsure if it does or doesn't have to do with the different teams that work on Legends of Zelda and Pokémon respectively, as they may distribute different workloads to different people who can get more things done in a specific amount of time. Something that the Pokémon team tends to do is split their devs into 2 groups. For example, Group A works on development of main series titles, and Group B works on remakes, remasters, or any other similar game. I'm not sure if they have another group for side series, but if they don't, then that could also add onto their workload, causing more games that need to be rushed out by their deadline. And the Pokémon Company has a very strict deadline when it comes to games. Game Freak needs to time their game cycles with the anime, TCG, merchandise, and various other projects from different companies to make sure things are out and readily available to the public by a certain time. And that can put pressure on developers to find a way to innovate without getting too crazy, lest they don't have time to finish something too ambitious. However, with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, they outsourced to another company, most likely so they could work on Legends Arceus with their own crew, without having to deal with this tight of a time constraint now that they have the space to breathe. But the Pokémon Company knows that people will buy their games no matter what, so maybe they don't try as hard? And each game recently has outsold the last, so they must be doing something right.
Yeah, but the true question is, does high sales always translate into a good game? The open world, as it stands, doesn't really feel how it should. Not free and not impressive. It is there, but it doesn't feel completed. There is a reason why open world games are rather rare among indie games. It is a challenge. A lot can go wrong, and to craft a world that doesn't feel empty and soulless, it needs to be crafted with care and detail. 2 things that arguably can improve when the crafter is given the time to put care and detail into the project. Details such as the animations that people are complaining about, walking animations to be specific. And yeah, Pokémon Legends improved them, giving Pokémon a rotate animation, for example. But I don't see any animations that strike me with awe because I found them, and no animation that impressed me. Because, as cruel as it sounds, Pokémon doesn't exist in a vacuum. Other games exist and create worlds where characters are given smooth animations that impress the audience both because of their detail or their creativity. And it is those details that, in the end, make the game feel more alive.
However, there have been times in-game where there's special details, like when the player character reacts to the overworld weather conditions. But these small things, to most fans, don't equate to much in the big picture. So many people have mentioned this before, so I won't go into too much detail, but others like to talk about the Nat Dex situation, where the developers supposedly sacrificed the decks in order to supply better quality animations. We can see how that turned out.
Speaking of cuts, not to mention the cut of abilities in Pokémon Legends. Arguably, the biggest reason as to why the battle gameplay of Legends doesn't feel as compelling as it does in other games. A cut that felt huge, to me at least, and in my opinion, didn't feel like a necessary cut at all, keeping in mind what a big cut in gameplay quality it also is.
Yes, especially since they have their abilities programmed in for easy Pokemon home transfer as well. It just seems like an odd choice. But again, speaking of quality, it's also worth mentioning the various graphical bugs you could encounter on a regular basis in the game as well. From glitchy grass, trees, and textures, to Pokemon spawning in rocks. And the bugs you can also encounter when throwing your balls, such as throwing them in the water. It just throws slowly.
And the thing I'm thinking is that just 2018, 1 year prior to Sword and Shield, we had the release of the Pokemon Let's Go games. And a year prior to that, in 2017, we had Ultra Sun and Moon. And the spaces between games are getting shorter and shorter. Even now, we don't have one Pokemon game per year, it's two. And I can't help but wonder, do we need a Pokemon game every year if the price is that the games don't feel as polished anymore? The Pokemon community is unique in the way they keep old games relevant. You can go to Twitch right now and see people play the original Pokemon Yellow or Red version, emulated like it was. There's no other franchise that has this luxury. And I'd wish Game Freak would make good use of it, because I can guarantee people would be willing to wait. But okay, every game has their flaws, I suppose, and a perfect game doesn't exist anyway after all. And I enjoyed all the Pokemon games nonetheless. However, the lack of improvement isn't the only thing suffering.
Each Pokemon game has their own special feature that makes the game or generation as a whole quite unique, be it the Alola Pokemon rides or the unique catching style of the Let's Go games. And I would not dare to say that Game Freak isn't trying to bring a new innovative idea to the table when it comes to new game mechanics or even new game genres altogether with various spin-off games.
However, I can't help but feel that oftentimes these attempts are a little half-assed. The Mega Evolutions, for example, were a pretty cool feature that was introduced in the X and Y games. And while you could use them in Pokemon Sun and Moon, they haven't really picked them up anymore after that. And I really don't quite understand the point of doing that in every new gen now. Introducing a new game mechanic that changes the gameplay just to abandon it pretty much in the next installment. I mean, I do get that it makes the region of the gen special in a way. However, it also makes the change pointless for the franchise. Now, Mega Evolution is next to forgotten, and those who loved it miss it now, and those who criticized it never get to see any improvements on the concept.
And same goes for the game mechanics that make tasks easier in each Pokemon generation. Like the Dex Nav, that could show you all the Pokemon that live in the area you're in, and if you've already caught them, could even tell you more about their potential, plus allow you to search for a specific Pokemon if you want. It was introduced in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, only to disappear forever and not return since their debut in 2014. Why? What happened? Did they just forget that it existed, or just want it to feel special to that game?
All this together doesn't feel like real innovation to me anymore. It feels more like recycling. You come up with Mega Evolutions, but now you need a new innovative idea, so now we have Z moves, but now that's old, so now we have Dynamaxing, which kinda just fuses Z moves and Mega Evolution with each other. Isolated, they sound like innovative new ideas, but in context, I feel as if they are more or less the same thing, recycled, so it's harder to make out what the original idea actually was.
But still, I would argue that game mechanics are still cared for quite a lot. The new game mechanics they introduce, they do try to put their heart into it. Other parts of the game are much more neglected to the point that I'd argue there's barely much innovation at all. An example would be the still dead fish-like expressions of Pokemon characters, the protagonist especially, which is a common sight throughout the Pokemon games since the introduction of character models. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there are none. I mean, facial expressions in Legends are much more improved than in Sun and Moon, but they're still not up to snuff. Pokemon not only has to be measured up to other Pokemon games, but also to other games of the time as well. And compared to them, Pokemon is definitely under-delivering.
But of course, you could argue that Pokémon is not a game that you play for an immersive story that captures you with facial expressions to make you feel with them. And okay, fair enough. That's an opinion you can have, I guess. After all, the Pokémon are in the center. So they are what need most care and innovation. Right? If that's so, then where are dynamic animations that we did criticize forever now? Pokémon Legends, as the latest Pokémon game, did improve the Pokémon animations a lot. People went nuts over the fact that Pokémon that walk and change direction actually have a turnaround animation. And yeah, that is cool, and it is great they added that. But compared to other games of the time, it should have been a given in Sword and Shield already. More time for the team to experience the game they made, to test their ideas and develop them, in my opinion, would improve Pokemon innovation a lot, and could bring us truly different Pokemon games. May it be a spin-off or a main series game.
Pokemon games like Detective Pikachu have already proven that daring Pokemon games that change how we play and experience Pokemon can be very successful. But, well, sometimes you just happen to have a good idea and it doesn't seem to matter how much time you have. If your game's unique or an interesting direction of the franchise, then anything can happen. But even with that perspective, there are more reasons for longer dev circles. Pokemon is such a gigantic franchise, with an estimated net worth of just over $92.1 billion, a net worth higher than Star Wars, higher than Mario even. In fact, it's almost 3 times as high as Mario. So, one would think that Game Freak has an enormous studio with lots and lots of employees and people to work on their games, right?
Well, as of 2021, it is estimated that Game Freak has 167 employees to work for the company directly. Just to put this into perspective, that is not even half of what Bethesda has with an estimated 400, who, by the way, cannot drop a game every year. How they work their Pokemon magic is a complete mystery to me. When researching the work conditions, all I could find really is that Game Freak wants to offer a 4-day week to their employees, but nothing about stress, time pressure, or anything like that, which is kind of fishy in itself. I mean, no matter how awesome your company is, surely someone is bothered by something, right? Where are you? Why is no one complaining even a little?
But let's say everything really is perfect once you get hired by Game Freak. I still find it a bit strange that such a large franchise doesn't seem to invest in themselves all that much. The way I see it, to work on a project and to make the project reach its full potential, you need time and you need money. And I don't see Game Freak investing in either of those things. They're not investing in many employees, so there's the production costs. And in fact, they are reducing staff every year. And as we stated earlier, they're relatively not investing much time into their games. How can we expect a Pokemon game that's innovative and improving itself if the company isn't even investing time or money into that goal?
In an interview, Junichi Masuda stated that he'd work with just 20 employees if he could. He noticed that having bigger teams results in having too many cooks in a kitchen. Masuda prefers small teams due to how key communication is, which can be challenging when developing games. And I won't argue with that, as I can see his point, and I fully understand that. The thing is, though, that the games, even if successful, don't prove his point, as they clearly show a lag that must have a cause. There must be a reason as to why an older game that wasn't even intended for the Switch was able to implement a better open world that is technically better presented than a game that released just this year. And if it's not the size of the team, there's only one cause left: time. And so, all I can do is hope the team will work their magic and implore them to take their time to do so, to make a game that reaches its full potential. But what do we two dorks know? We are Pokemon fans, and I, for one, love to play all the Pokemon games, and I don't really dislike them. Yet still, I see an uprising in Pokemon clones that are actually really good and fully developed, maybe reaching their full potential. While I never quite dislike Pokemon games, the feeling that a Pokemon game did reach their full potential is a feeling I haven't had in a while.
But what about you? What do you think about the ever-shortening dev circles for Pokemon? Do you agree with us? Or do you have the perfect argument in hand to change our minds? Let us know in the comments down below. We'd love to hear what you think.
Thank you, Cilan. I fully agree. I'd love to hear what you guys think as well. But also, thank you very, very much for helping me and giving your insight and thoughts on the topic as well.
You're very welcome.
And if you are looking for cool covers from your favorite cartoon shows, look no further than Silent Steel. Links are in the description, and I highly encourage you to check them out. And with all that said, I hope to see you next time. Until then, have it good. Bye!
Bye!